Welcome back to Chapter 2 of this episode of Double Click. Are you grappling with how emerging technologies might affect the employee experience in your organization today and beyond? We're going to be diving in today to the great topic of sustainable upskilling. We've got Marcus Mossberger with us. He's the Future of Work Strategist at Infor, and Joshua Whitworth, the Chief Deputy of the State of Idaho. We're going to be examining some of the best strategies that you can take to navigate these workplace evolutions and ultimately deliver innovation for the long term by providing meaningful ways employees can engage. If you'd like to listen to Chapter 1 of this episode, go to the Double Click YouTube playlist. With that said, let's dive in. I'd like to double click on the topic of sustainable growth for employees for those tuning in. Particularly, what I'd love to know is, do you have any insight into particular industries that are really feeling the pinch in terms of the skills gaps right now?
Yeah, specifically in the public sector and specific into our finance organization, we're seeing a 30% drop in financial professionals leaving college without a degree. That is creating a deficit in the entire market, let alone the restricted market the government provides with the lower pay that we normally have. And so we are approaching that, having the technology say, we're going to bring somebody maybe in out of high school, give them experiential learning, put them on the front lines of activity, send them across a whole organization. And if we don't have a system that can track that, that can get lost very quickly. You lose your employee in the mass of the organization. But if we can say that's a program for the entire state, every organization, all 85 agencies that we work with, and we have a system that tracks that and rolls that data up so that we can say that we're efficiently moving that knowledge base and understanding across our organization, then we can actually build our workforce up in a different way and invest in them with certificates and degrees later on in life, but start them out early.
I think I would probably point to, first and foremost, like blue collar type of industries where, again, there's not necessarily as much of a formal path forward for individuals who decide not to go the college route to know what those opportunities look like for them. But it's not really blue collar, white collar, or these days it's no collar, isn't it? I think that's an old axiom that doesn't fit anymore. Healthcare is another one. So, when you talk about, building a pipeline for the future, I'm talking to healthcare clients that are literally building skills academies at the high school level and building healthcare related high schools that they guarantee the students coming out a job. They're even going to their parents and saying, hey, do you want a job? So, again, they're looking at very non-traditional ways of starting to build skills and abilities at an earlier age with the intent to harvest them later on to be able to utilize in their organization. So much more creative, again, non-traditional ways of exploring this.
And we're seeing the interest in investing in that workforce development activity, right? Whether it's certificates and things that they can take with them into wherever they might go. So it's the skills, it's not just the degrees and the activity, but it's how we grow that knowledge and help that next generation of the workforce choose where they want to be without having to choose it at day one too.
That's a good point too. I'll just say one more thing. The paper ceiling, if you're familiar with that term. So traditionally, a lot of jobs required a degree. And so we're seeing the paper ceiling get shredded, if you will. I think last I checked, AT&T, 5% of their job openings required a college degree. 95% of their other job openings said, you don't need a degree to do this kind of work. So recognizing that traditional expectation of, do you have this experience and this degree and this certification or credential, they're saying that's less important than, do I look at you and say, can you do this job? Do you possess those transferable skills?
And I think it's developing those skills consistently in something that if within the organization that the rest of the organization knows. And without the technology and things to support that, it gets lost in someone's interview process rather than understanding that we have good soft skills or this employee can really develop and knows how to manage conflict. It might not be a degree, but that skill has been learned through project or activity that now is recorded in our activity over time.
Are there any successful upskilling strategies or approaches that you've learned in your conversations with businesses, Marcus?
It's interesting. The 2024 Human Capital Trends report from Deloitte literally has a section on human sustainability. We associate the word with ESG and the environment, and we all recognize the environment has limits, right? So do people. And so if we apply that same kind of way of thinking to say, how do we ensure we're not burning people out, especially in fields like yours where people are mission driven? They're way more susceptible to burnout and to doing too much because there's intrinsic meaning in the work that they're doing, and so they do too much. You see it in healthcare too. So again, it comes back to the emphasis of workforce well-being and making sure that you're creating an environment where you're helping them avoid that burnout by using technology to do some of the work for them, by giving them access to information to make better decisions. And again, just changing the overall approach to how people are working. So again, for me, it keeps coming back to workforce well-being.
Having a sustainable workforce. There's kind of two philosophies. There's one, and this is something I think leaders have to learn to accept. I always tell my team, the best thing I can do for you is not be needed. So you work to not be needed because your team is now able to do that. But then when we talk about that well-being of that staff, it's how do you take those repetitive things that the employee gets just tired of doing, right? And wants to shift that off. And can AI, can technology automate more so that they can spend their time doing value add, maybe that intrinsic award where they've actually provided somebody guidance rather than just having to do a transaction in a system. So the more automation and the more AI can open up those and take that kind of activity away from them, I think the happier they're going to be in their job as well.
If you're interested to learn more about some of the great topics we covered on this episode, follow the instructions on screen now or click the link in the description. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe and click on the notification bell. Josh, you are driving significant innovation at the state of Idaho. Can you share with us some of the steps that you're putting in place to really drive employee engagement?
You have to start with leadership, and leadership has to be aligned, and it has to be consistently aligned. You invest in those relationships, and you invest in making sure that that mantra and that cultural drive is across the organization. And so to me, that's one of the biggest things we do. We go talk with leaders across our whole organization and ensure that that is being driven across those. The second thing is ensuring that employees have a venue to bring that up. And so within our organization, having that opportunity to participate in multiple things and bring a new perspective, that diversity of thought into those activities. I think the tactic is leadership makes sure those opportunities for them to be engaged and build those diverse teams, and not just have the one person that always does it or the one team that always does it, but bring new players into that as a mechanism to ensure that everybody can bring thoughts to the table.
From a technology perspective, obviously the topics of AI and generative AI are huge and impacting every business these days. I happen to be a big fan of Gen AI myself, but what I'd love to understand, Marcus, this goes to you first, is what's the potential for the biggest impact on upskilling and sustainable upskilling? What do you see on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, the one that we have to point to right now is generative AI, and it's not just the opportunity for it to help us create content. I think it's also the opportunity for it to become a digital assistant or a shoulder Sherpa. So like to have this technology constantly on your shoulder. I was listening to a podcast recently with, is it Sam Altman? He was on a podcast with Trevor Noah, and he talked about at some point in the future, we may all have our own personal ChatGPT, like that literally knows us. And it not only does it respond to us knowing who we are, but it can, in the future, proactively nudge us to say, hey, you might want to consider this decision or this path forward. So, again, what the technology, what the form it takes is less important than the potential for us to be able to personalize our experience more so than we've ever been able to in the workplace. We see it in our consumer lives. We expect that the next generation expects the ability to personalize their lives. But in the workplace, we've not embraced that as much. I think that's what we're going to see. It's going to be really cool.
I totally agree with you. The potential of that technology and generative AI to help guide us could be even applied to, you think you want to be a leader, right? You think you want to be a manager of an organization, but you're an excellent technician. Organizations shouldn't force you to be a manager when you're not a manager. But maybe that AI helps you have an analysis of your skills and helps you to show, hey, you don't just have to be this. Here's your other path for your opportunity that maybe excites you more than just the pay increase you might get over here. And so that little bit of a nudge, or would you call it a Sherpa, on your shoulder that helps you kind of maybe see a path that you wouldn't otherwise see and allow you to look up and see those opportunities. I see a lot of value in that, as well as just to help us make better decisions from all the data. No matter what, unless you can put everybody in the room and equally pull information out, I see a lot of value where generative AI can pull that data up and summarize it so that leaders can make better decisions based on that, whether employment or in operational activities.
I'd love to finish today's conversation with you both sharing what should organizations and business leaders be really laser focused on today? What should they be thinking about when it comes to the future of work to really best support employees?
I think number one is retaining their people. It's not just keeping people, it's also keeping their best people. That's got to be first and foremost on their mind. The second would be planning for the future, which is so hard because it's unknown and it changes so dramatically and so quickly. How do you ensure that the people that you've now kept are prepared and capable of delivering on that future state? And then third, I think there's always going to be a technology component. There's never going to be an end to us saying, I finally implemented this technology and it took a really long time and I'm done. There's no done. This is now going to be never ending. And so how do you ensure that you're planning and making sure that your long-term strategy, that you're playing the long game, is well defined?
Leaders should be looking at their workforce and saying, how am I promoting adaptability in my skill sets of my employees? Because I want that same in my technology. So the more that I do something that's customized to everything that I expect it to be, I can adapt to the change in the world. And so as you're looking at technology stacks and how you implement them and your platforms that you're using, focusing on platforms that are adaptable to your future, because it will change. And I think it will start changing more rapidly. And so being adaptable is probably one of the greatest skills, both in technology and people, over the next decade.
And that's a wrap for our discussion today. Thanks so much, guys, for your great contributions. And thanks to you for tuning into this great chapter of DoubleClick. Until next time.